Hello, First Assembly. Welcome back for another session of Parenting on Purpose. As you may know already, if you've been following along, this is session number 14, and we are nearing the end. And I don't know how much you've been able to take in, but I do hope that whatever the amount is, that it's been helpful. Our tagline, our foundation, as you know, is that the generations to come will know. Psalm 78:6. We have an honor, we have a privilege to pass on faith to generations that come behind us. And this is where we've been with topics, and I won't read them all to you, but in case you are wanting to look back and see where we've been or maybe what you've missed, right now we're on session 14, Family Legacy Part 1. So what's going to happen in this last topic is give you some new ideas and do some review as well to wrap up the series, hopefully in a very nice and meaningful way. Think of spirituality in the family, passing on a spiritual legacy. There's a lot more that can be put into this series. I know there's a lot more spiritual training that can be put in, and I have a tendency to pack in as much as I possibly can, and as a professor, as the many hats that I wear as therapist, there are so many other things I've been thinking, well, oh wait, I should put in this and I could have put in that, and there just when it comes to emotional, intellectual and a holistic development of the child, and I have woven in a lot of that, and I'm going to weave in a little bit more in these sessions, but our primary focus has been the spiritual development, the passing on faith. And I'm just saying all that because who knows, maybe someday I'll be back with one that's a little different. But I created this chart to just kind of give a visual to the reality. When spouses come together, the husband's legacy, spiritual legacy, the wife's spiritual legacy, and then the combination of those legacies. And when the combination sometimes doesn't mix well, or maybe is in war with each other, or maybe one's legacy was totally bankrupt in a way and the other one had a really strong legacy, but what has to happen as the next step is to select and train ourselves and decide what's going to be what is going to be part of the spiritual legacy in our family. And again, I've said this before, but I'm afraid that many Christian parents just kind of let it happen. And so that's why I emphasize with my college students who take this kind of material with me that it's not too early, but plan to be the kind of, you may not even know who your spouse is, but for you to start to determine that this is the way I'm going to raise my kids and shepherd their heart and all those things. And then when you meet that person, the selection process, that we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and we're going to keep this, we're going to throw this away, and then we're going to incorporate these new things that neither one of us had. And so then it's educating our kids, it's forming our family and forming faith in our family, and all of that, all those decisions. But then it's the laying out the blueprint that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. I have read, I've studied, I've watched series like this, and we've determined that these are the components of the blueprint that we want our kids to experience in our home. This is how we're going to live out Psalm 78, Deuteronomy 6, Mark chapter 12. This is how we're going to do these things. And I'm going to come back to this graphic at the very end of this topic to kind of wrap up our whole series and show you some things, an acrostic that I believe that are the vital components of that blueprint that you need to lay out. But before we get to that, let's kind of lay the groundwork of the what is legacy and family legacy, and what I want you to grasp from this final topic in the course. I want you to understand that the areas that make up spiritual legacy, and what are those areas, and how do you evaluate those in terms of your own family. I'm not going to have any inventories for you to evaluate them, but for you to just do self-evaluation. And the things you want to look for is the state of spiritual legacy that was given to you in three key areas, and what you want to pass on to your kids from those. Again, no inventories involved, but counting on you to do that yourself. And then really for you to understand that a legacy is something that is handed down or remains from a previous generation or time, whether it's good or bad. That's why I said earlier, husband and wife might be bringing things into their legacy that they don't want and that weren't helpful, and they're going to forego those, and that's okay. Build your own legacy. I don't expect my kids and their spouses to just do everything that we did. No, they get to build their own. And but I hope that I've given you some vital things that should be in all Christian legacies, see, from that generation on. And it's a wonderful thing. And one of those components is social. How do we give your child the insight and strong social skills for cultivating healthy, stable relationships? And I'm simply touching on it lightly, more as a review, because we covered social a lot in reference to living out your faith, loving others, caring for others, looking for needs, responding to needs, asking for forgiveness, making things right. There's so much social, and I'm very big on the social context because it's not just a biblical concept, but I am an Adlerian play therapist, and Alfred Adler, one of his main things was the social embeddedness and the social need that is in all individuals, and even expanding that into the social dynamics of birth order and what that means for a person. This is so vital, and it is God designed that God made us to connect with Him, but to connect with others as well. Another part of legacy is the emotional part, that enduring sense of security and emotional stability nurtured in an environment of safety and love. That has been woven throughout this series as well. Again, as a point of review, we've talked about caring for your kids, empowering your kids, talking to them in a loving, caring way, even at times of conflict, at times when you're upset, what to do, how do we restore their heart to us as well as to each other, for siblings, and then to God. The emotional, I've warned you about some things along the way of how we use our words, and shaming and guilting and all of that. And so I just want you to think about social is a big part of your legacy. Emotional is a big part of your legacy. I'm not going to say physical, or at least I don't have a slide for physical, but that should be in here as well. If you remember back to a previous session, how physical ties into emotional in many ways. The psychosocial part of us, the biopsychosocial part, that all ties together in a human being. And but the spiritual legacy has been the main focus of this course, of this series. The process whereby parents model and reinforce the unseen realities of the spiritual, that there is a God, and that that we are meant to be a shining light in this world for Him and His love, that we are supposed to communicate His love and grace to the world by the way we live and the things we say and the way we treat others, and all of that has been involved in this. And there's an acrostic I'd like to share with you, because I believe that a good way to wrap this up is to give you some more practical ideas, but also to talk about atmosphere. There's a book called The Family Compass that I encourage you to look up. And one of the things it talks about is developing a family atmosphere. And my daughter and son-in-law, and I've referred to them a number of times because they are the ones that we first see living out the things that we did with our own kids, with our 4 kids. And so to watch them carry it out. But one thing they do that I'm going to say we did pretty well also is to create an atmosphere of spirituality, of focusing on the things of God and us as believers, and that can be the atmosphere of kindness, of love, of forgiveness, no backbiting and those kinds of things. That there's always restoration involved. All of those things that we've talked about, and I'm going to hit on them here quickly. But the acrostic, the family atmosphere. How do we create an aroma in our home of love? Now, we could do an acrostic of atmosphere, but aroma is a little bit shorter. And again, as a way of summary, one way that we create a loving, wonderful aroma is affection. rather than being so rigid with our kids that they wonder when was my last hug, but that there's always affection, not just physical affection, but verbal affection, that there's no question in their minds that they're accepted and loved, and that they're attached to their caregiver, our parent, us as their parents, and through touch and words that we dispense the fact that you are precious, you are a treasure. Remember, I said to you in a previous series or session that if we really want our kids to show empathy, to understand empathy, be able to look at others with empathy, they have to understand themselves as a precious treasure first. It's hard for anyone who has been devoid of that, who's been devoid of a secure attachment, emotional attachment, loving attachment, to really care about other people, to put themselves in their shoes. But as we do that with our kids, we are fostering that their heart will be that way towards others. So affection, if you're not an affectionate family, you've got to be intentional to build that in. R in aroma is the respect factor, and the respect for each other rather than being demeaning. There's a quote on the screen that I used before: "A child who is allowed to be disrespectful to his parents will not have true respect for anyone." And of course, respect, you can see it really going both ways here. It's not just on the graphic, it's not just a child respecting the parent, but for a parent to respect the child as well, that it's fostered in the home. Because we know it has a dramatic effect on life. For spirituality, it gives your child true value, that you are respected as a precious creation of God. I'm going to respect you, you respect me, you respect the authority in your life just as you respect God as the authority in your life. Emotionally, it gives them a sense of security, which I've already mentioned in the previous slide, that being secure to a loving, caring person. And then socially, it will establish a foundation for loving and respecting others. We've talked a lot about that, especially in the session dealing with asking for forgiveness and in the responsibility of a person to restore and so on. But loving and respecting others, if we really want all that I've talked about in this series, especially back in those sessions about kindness and honor and respect and how we get our kids to show them, they've got to have the foundation of respecting the parents and understanding respect in the family and how that works. The O is a sense of order in family. There's rules, there's roles, there's rights. We're also going to talk about rituals and routines later in this topic. And so remember, as a parent, we talked about authority, and so authority goes along with the kind of order. And what are your family rules? What are the expectations? What are the roles in your family? I've not talked a lot about that. And that's another one of those topics that I could go on for a couple sessions, and I'm not going to, but who does what in the family and who has what responsibility, even to who's the bug killer, who's the trash taker outer, are things shared? Do you draw things along traditional gender lines? Is that why not have your kids see both parents cooking or both parents doing duties around the house, and those kinds of things, to open up the possibilities that, because whatever you foster, whatever you model in your home, remember, your kid's going to take into their own homes when they're building their own families. So do you want your sons and your daughters to grow up understanding that they have shared responsibilities and shared roles with each other? And I think that's a great way to go. And fostering a sense of trust in the family also goes along with this O in order. When we talked about lying and stealing being two things that often destroy trust or hurt trust, and how are you going to incorporate that? The M, merriment, and I know that's a long word. It's not like we walk around saying I have a lot of merriment today, but the aroma in your family is it fun? Is there goofiness? Is maybe that's just not you, but let it. Why can't it be you in a moment to turn on some music and just an impromptu dance around and be goofy together? And no matter what a family does together, it can be peppered with fun. Joy and laughter will draw a family together, and funny things together, whether it's watching funny things or doing funny things together, and the kind of memories that you're going to talk about for years. And when you sit around the table and talk about great times, and as your kids get older and they talk about the fun, the goofy things that we did, and let that be a sense of pride that even though you might be a very introverted, very proper type, and you just silliness is just not you. That their kids saw you break out of that. Their kids saw you be intentional with that. Have fun, and with the having fun, I'm gonna talk about rituals and routines later. But what things can you build in that is like the yearly fun or the regular fun, the things that you start to enjoy together, hiking, camping, vacationing, traveling, doing goofy things together, having family fun nights, which I'll talk to you in a little while about. And then the affirmation. And this sounds a lot like the first A, affection. But when your child is at home, do they see themselves through a critical eye? Do you see them through a critical lens? Because if you do, then they are going to. And so are you affirming them enough? Are you affirming the things about them that you see standing out? Are you affirming the things that you see them doing good things? Or do you just chalk it up as, well, that's their responsibility? Affirming them verbally, let them understand that they are loved beyond a shadow of a doubt, because again, by doing that, you are equipping them to love and care for others in a deep, powerful way. And along with that goes this, and this is not a spiritual thing. This is something I often use in counseling with all ages, but particularly kids. You think of the 4 parts of us where these are called the crucial C's. These are things that we all have in our life. And if we all take inventory, if you take inventory of each of your children on these 4 things, are they connected? Do they are they connected to others? And do they connect to others pretty well? What about capable? Do they feel capable? Is there capability in their life? Or do they tend to not try things because they don't feel very capable? And that ties a little bit to courageous. Courageous is different though. But do they want to? Are they afraid of things? Do they not have the self-strength inside of them to do something, to try something? Again, capable and courageous can be a little blurred, but are they confident in the fact that they can figure it out? Capable? Do they not even want to try? Courageous? And then counts. Do they matter in this world? Do they know that they matter? And I know I'm hitting you with a lot of different things, but this is a valuable tool, because when you think of a child or each person in your family, think of which one might they be deficit in, or which ones. Are they stronger? Typically people are strong in 2 and not so strong in others, or at least 2 are kind of at the forefront. And so are you low in one of these things? Is your family as a group low in these things? Are your children low in 1 or 2 or all of these things? And what are you going to do about it? Because understanding your child and their individuality is so important. Some of the things I'm not going to dive into just because the series is kind of long already. But when it comes to birth order, I encourage you to get especially Kevin Lehman's books on birth order, to understand what makes your child, even because of where they're positioned in your family. And if you're a blended family, you're going to want to look at that as well, because birth order changes when families merge together. And as a single mom, like I spent all of my teenage years with a single parent. And so when I've talked about both parents, this is a disclaimer I wish I would have made more in this series. I never want it to sound like all of this is only possible if you have 2 parents. We know that God is the father of the fatherless, and we know that he will help you, single parent, to make up difference in your kid's life. And yes, ideally for kids to have both parents is great, is wonderful. But anyway, I'm not discounting you. I'm not leaving you out when I talk about a mom and dad and so on. But okay, back to this crucial C's. Even as a family, and I said this a moment ago, but take inventory of your family. Are you a courageous family? Do you venture out and try new things? If not, why don't you go ahead? Does everyone in your family know that they count, that they're valued? Are you a family that's capable, or do you kind of shy back? And maybe in this world that maybe you're low in the green square and connected. You don't have people over very much, and you're not a very social family. And man, the spiritual practice of hospitality, embrace it. Start to have someone over to your house. Let your kids understand that as a family unit, we're going to work at being connected to other families and other people, and we're going to have single moms over and their kids and whoever. But maybe that's something to work on. And another tip I want to give you here is what to pray for your children. We say, you really need to pray for your kids. Who else is going to pray for your kids? Some people are blessed to have multiple generations praying for them at the same time, parents and grandparents and so on, and other people outside their family. But when you take time to pray for your kids, and please do, I've not talked a lot about the spiritual disciplines that you would incorporate in your family's life, and they're definitely coming up here. And one of them is to pray for them. The 5 P's, you pray for purpose. That they will understand their mission in this world, their general mission as a Christian, as a believer in this world, that their passion for God will be something that they will have a hunger and a thirst for God that they will try to attempt to quench throughout life, and passions for other things, even beyond the spiritual matters, passion for something that they've really enjoyed and they feel successful at. Pals, who will be the Jonathans in their life, like King David had Prince Jonathan in his life as a best friend. Pray for your kids to have those kinds of supporting. Now, it's going to include siblings as well if you have more than one child, but also beyond the family, who are going to be those that you would pray for your kids' friends. God, give my kids friends that are going to love you just as much and build them up, and not be antagonistic against a heart for you, and for their partners, for them to for you to pray even when they're kids, even before they were born. I stood at my daughters and sons. I officiated in both of their weddings, and for me to be able to say to the in-law, to the one they were marrying, I've prayed for you since they were a little child. In fact, I prayed for you before I even knew who I was going to marry. I remember driving along going to work after my first year in college, and I was listening to a song by Wayne Watson called "Somewhere in the World Today." And he's saying, somewhere in the world today, a little boy is going out to play. I've heard it 2 different ways, or a little girl is going out to play. And so the lyrics say, somewhere in the world, there's a spouse to my child who is growing up. And I pray that their parents will have the guidance, a love for God, and to raise them in such a way that they match so well with my son or my daughter. And I thought, why not? If here I am praying for my spouse, whoever it is, and then I'm thinking, well, I could actually pray for my kids, whoever they are, and I can actually pray for their spouses, and I can actually pray for the parents of my kids' spouses, again, because we serve a God who's eternal. What does that mean? No beginning and no end, which means he's in the past and he's already there in the future, and I can be praying for people that I don't even know yet, and in my kids' lives. And think about that. If maybe by some chance you're watching this and you're not even a parent, or maybe you don't even know who your spouse is, it's not too early to pray for all of those things that I've mentioned, and of course included in that I've already said, they're partners, your child's partners, that whoever they are. And then purity, a sense of honoring God with their lives. We mess up, we make mistakes, and it's sad that we live in a culture that sometimes things that people will do in their younger years, the society doesn't let them forget, and social media will shame people for things they did 20 years ago, even though they've grown. I was talking to one of my kids about this the other day, actually a few of them at once, and it breaks my heart because I feel like I'm always growing up. I'm 52 years old, and there were things that, maybe I've an email or whatever that I sent 5-10 years ago that I don't want to be held accountable, because I've grown, and I don't, I'm better at these things, but yet society can be so unforgiving and so self-righteous. And it's not that we have to live a perfect life, but for our kids to be able to say before God, I am a growing person. I'm going to honor him to the best of my ability. And establishing family identity. In the very first session, I talked about how a friend and I each developed a family crest to really define what is our family, what does it stand for, and to choose scriptures that incorporate our mission as a family. And but it's not just that. It's not just a family crest that defines our family. It's not just the scriptures we choose as our theme verses, our mission verses, but it's so many things. And one thing is the traditions. What are the practices of handing down stories and beliefs and customs that from one generation to another to establish and reinforce the idea of this is who we are. And please, again, one of the beauties and one of the wonderful things of God's grace and God's mercy is that if your family identity is one that was just, I've used the word bankrupt or let's say corrupt, that you can start new. My favorite Old Testament story, my favorite, I would say, character in the Old Testament, and his name is Josiah. And Josiah in Kings, 2 Kings chapter 22 and 2 Chronicles, I think it's 34, Josiah became king when he was 8 years old. And then it says, and he walked in the ways of his father David. And that phrase is used when kings honored God, when kings did their best to honor God, because David wasn't his father. There were many generations after David. But you'll notice with a lot of the kings in these records, it'll say, or he walked in the ways of his father and did evil in the sight of God. But Josiah says he walked. Now, this is really interesting in the life of Josiah, because Josiah had what I would classify the worst pair of father and grandfather that you could really have. And his grandfather Manasseh came in and killed the priests. When he became king, and now let me back even a little further. Josiah's great-grandfather was the other of the two. There are two greatest kings in Judah. I would classify as the greatest, Josiah and his great-grandfather Hezekiah. But why in between those two brackets there was such pain? Those were choices that were made. And so Manasseh rebelled against what Hezekiah, his father, did of bringing righteousness in the land and doing these wonderful things of praying and God wiping out armies. And there's so much in the history of Hezekiah. But Manasseh decided to go the other direction, and he tore down the good things, and he built up Baal worship and places for idol worship, and he put prostitutes in the temple, and he instituted worship of other deities like Molech, where the people, the children of God would actually sacrifice their children to other gods. And I mean, like, just horrendous things going on. And then when he died, his son Ammon became king, and Ammon wasn't much better. He was wicked as well. And then Josiah becomes king. All he has seen is this wickedness, but yet somebody was speaking into his life. Someone behind the scenes. Somebody was giving him a vision for the future. And the word, the scenario, the story says that in the days of his youth, he began to seek the things of God. And when he was around 19 or 20, he made reforms in the land. He tore down all the stuff that his grandfather had instituted. He cleaned out the temple. And they found a book of the law, which hadn't been read for years. Think of that. It's like there was no Bible in the land. And he instituted the first Passover in a long, long time, and gave his own animals, all these wonderful things he did. But all of that began in his heart as a young child. And so I love that story. I've loved it for my own life. I am thankful for the heritage that I do have. But there's this a missing piece where I did look to a lot of people to help me to build a heritage. I've told you about my grandparents. Haven't said much about my dad. My dad was diagnosed with lymphoma when I was 10, and he passed away when I was 13. And before that, he was not a believer, but when he was diagnosed, just the changes in his life is a radical change, a radical salvation. But him passing when I was 13, it's not like we talked about the kind of father to be. And I had only had a 3-year glimpse of what it meant to be a spiritual parent. And so for me to look at the examples of other people and to kind of pull from this person and pull from that person, and for other people to whisper things into my ear, whether they were live people or books or series like this, to allow speaking into my life. And I'm grateful for those. So I know that was not a tangent, because I really want you to understand those things. But for those of you who aren't satisfied, or you look at the what you were given as a legacy and it's just not going to measure up for what you want to do, remember that it can start with you. Well, we're going to pause right there, and we're going to come back for part 2. See you next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Thank you again for being part of this, and I hope it's been beneficial for you. God bless.